Hey there, it's Michael Prescott here again. This is the second video in my Isometric dungeon series where I draw little pieces of the kinds of things you find in a dungeon, but done in an isometric or 3D kind of way. Let's see. So for this one, I'm doing an archway. I got a corridor. It runs about 30 feet and it's 20 feet wide, and then it ends in maybe a 20-foot or higher wall. I don't really show that part. It doesn't go up to the ceiling. And then I'm blocking out the actual shape of the archway itself on that wall. So the only tricky part about this is making sure you check where the center line of the wall is to figure out the top of the archway. It's really tempting to try and draw a round circle, but because of foreshortening, that will not look right. We're looking at this archway at quite a steep angle. So I just build it up out of pieces. You can see I did the left side, the right side, figured out whether the center line was, and then made a really tight curve and then a really shallow curve just to connect the two pieces together. I like the archways to have some thickness to them so it doesn't just look like papercraft. I got a little threshold stone. I keep wanting to call that a lintel, but I think that's maybe that's something else. The other tricky bit is the center line for the doors themselves. Notice that they are not at all centered on the visible space, and that's because the doors are set back quite a bit. So you got to work it out from the center line of the corridor. Just run that along through the lintel. Now I'm busting out one of my favorite pens. I like these XS Faber-Castell pens, as I was using in my last video. Just tracing out all the basic shapes. I find that's a good starting point. The only trick is if you are doing something in the foreground, make sure you've got that all blocked in first. Generally, I try and draw the front of my dungeons first, but being a bit scattershot, sometimes I'll bounce around front to back. So it's good to know what's going to be in front, otherwise you kind of tie your hands a little bit working with pen. So this is going to have those old brass rings and then maybe a little strip of metal across the bottom of the door just to keep all the bands bolted together with some rivets. Once you've got the basic shape blocked in, it's easy to go a little bit crazy with detail. You can give some thickness to those metal bands and then put on the little wood grain, all that kind of stuff. I'm doing all this with the XS marker, as I said. I do all the detail and all the initial outlining with that before moving on to something thicker. So, alright, so for the sides of the archway, I'm just going to put on some bands of engraving of some kind. It's a bit sketchy because everything is so small here. One trick with going with too much detail is you can obscure the whole thing in a kind of a massive lines. You can't really tell, but the most important thing is to make sure that, again, as with the stairs, make sure that all the texturing details you add are lined up with the grid, unless there's a really good reason for them not to be. So again, I got to work out the center line of the archway because I want to put on a keystone at the top just to make it look like it's not just carved out of the wall, but it's actually a constructed archway made out of a bunch of different blocks. This is the same principle as before, just find the horizontal at the top, which of course is lined with the grid, and then you do a nice tight arch for the far side and then a slightly shallower curve for the near side. Put on the brick lines. I kind of go a bit mad with these brick marks on the wall. In a way, the point of all this texture is just to add and to reinforce to that sense that you're looking at a 3D shape. So all those horizontal lines need to follow the lines of the grid, and all the vertical marks have to be straight up and down. As I said in my last video, I like to outline all depth changes with a slightly thicker marker. So you can see I grab an S, a small marker, one slightly thicker than my XS, and I outline the inside of that archway there just to show that there's a depth change between the near side of the arch and the hidden part of the door. And now I'm just going mad with texture. I love doing these kind of irregular slabs of stone. You can just kind of draw in all sorts of random shapes and then start connecting them together with little lines. It's super easy to fill a space and makes it look kind of dungeony or castle-y. The thing to remember is that, again, because we are looking at a foreshortened space, we're not looking at these straight down from above. You have to make sure that all the stones you draw are not as tall as they are wide. They have to be a little bit wider. Otherwise, it'll spoil the illusion. Again, following the horizontal, just add a bit of thickness to these stones, make it look like there's a bit of embossing with those arch stones projecting from that back wall a little bit. And for a final touch, how about some dungeon crud in the corners? Little bits of leaf letter or finger bones, what have you. Anyway, that's it. I hope this one was useful. For my next one, I will be doing a village well.